Title: CCTV Captured Her Ritual Dance. Then People Disappeared. Part 1. The footage nobody should have seen. Introduction. They thought it was a prank, a glitch, a hoax someone planted into the school surveillance system. But the footage was real, grainy, time-stamped, and unedited. And in it, a girl danced barefoot in the abandoned gymnasium, spinning and twisting with movements too precise, too unnatural to be random. Her face remained turned away, her long black hair swaying like a curtain. No music played, yet the rhythm controlled her like a puppet on invisible strings. The next morning, the janitor never showed up, nor did the school librarian. Within a week, 5 people from the same building had vanished. No signs, no struggle, no goodbyes, just empty homes and unanswered calls. And the CCTV kept recording. The first to notice the footage was Mr. Dell, the school's aging security guard. He rarely checked overnight tapes. Nothing ever happened in the small town of Arden Falls. But on Monday morning, he was asked to find out why the gym lights flickered at 3:12 a.m. Scrolling through the grainy playback, he squinted at the screen, adjusting his glasses. The gym was empty at first. Then, at exactly 3 a.m., a figure stepped in from the shadows. She wore a long, dark dress that brushed the floor, soaked as if from rain, though there hadn't been a cloud in the sky that night. Her feet were bare and dirty. She stood motionless in the center of the room for exactly 1 minute before the lights flickered once, twice, and then dimmed to a ghostly yellow hue. And then she danced. The movements were strange, circular, ritualistic, almost hypnotic. She twirled slowly, arms rising and falling in rhythm, her fingers slicing the air like blades. Her feet traced patterns in the dust-covered floor, revealing an odd symbol beneath her. It hadn't been there before. Some sort of rune or glyph, etched in what looked like ash. Mr. Dell rewound the footage 3 times. Each time, he felt his stomach knot tighter. Something about the girl's body didn't seem human. The joints bent too far, the spins too fast. And even though her face was never visible, he felt she was looking directly at him, watching him from inside the screen. By the end of the video, Mr. Dell was pale and sweating. He logged the file onto a flash drive and took it straight to Principal Harland. But Harland never watched the video. By the time anyone realized Dell had gone to his office, both men were missing. The only evidence left was a flash drive on Harland's desk, still plugged in. With the file paused at the moment the dancer arched her back and dropped suddenly to her knees, arms raised to the ceiling like she was offering herself to something unseen. By the end of the day, whispers filled the halls. Students said the school was cursed. One student in particular took a deep interest in the footage. Lena Morel, 17, quiet, sharp, always watching. She had a knack for urban legends and a fascination with local disappearances. When she caught wind of the CCTV video and the missing staff, she convinced her friend Mason to help her sneak into the security room one night. Mason was reluctant. He didn't believe in ghosts, and Lena's obsession with strange rituals had always unnerved him. But she was persistent, and her theories about ley lines running beneath the school, about strange disappearances going back decades, all seemed to point to something real. That night, armed with a flashlight and Lena's laptop, they slipped into the school at midnight. It was deathly silent, the air cold despite it being late spring. The security room smelled of burnt wires and stale coffee. Lena sat at the console, while Mason kept watch by the door. It didn't take long to find the footage. There were more videos than Lena expected. 3 separate incidents, all at 3 a.m., all showing the same girl dancing the same way. In each, the gym appeared slightly different. More symbols on the floor, darker corners, a growing sense of presence in the shadows. Then something changed. The most recent video didn't end with the dancer disappearing. It ended with her stopping mid-spin and turning her head, just enough to reveal part of her face. There was no face, just skin, smooth and blank like wax. No eyes, no mouth, no expression. And then the camera cut out. Static flooded the screen. Lena froze. "That's not a mask," she whispered. "She doesn't have a face." Suddenly, a low hum filled the room. The screen went dark, then flickered, For a fraction of a second, the girl appeared again, this time closer. Not in the gym. In the hallway, just outside the security room. Lena screamed and pulled the plug on the monitor. The room fell into silence. But they weren't alone. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, slow, deliberate, soft as bare feet on tile. Mason locked the door. "This isn't funny, Lena." She wasn't laughing. They sat in silence for a full 10 minutes. No more footsteps. No sounds. Just their own breathing and the electric whine of disconnected hardware. Eventually, Mason peeked through the tiny window in the door. Empty, but on the floor, ash, formed into a spiral. At the center of it, a single black hair. They left without speaking, their minds racing, hearts pounding. The next morning, Mason didn't show up to school. Neither did the chemistry teacher, the front desk receptionist, or the lunch lady. For more people, gone without a trace. Lena didn't go back to school. She started researching every urban legend, every local newspaper clipping, every town record she could find. What she discovered chilled her more than the footage ever could. 30 years ago, the school was built over the ruins of an old chapel. A chapel destroyed in a mysterious fire. No official cause was ever given. Witnesses reported seeing lights inside the burned-out structure days after the fire. The land remained vacant until the school was built. And even then, construction was plagued with accidents and unexplained deaths. The chapel, Lena learned, was rumored to be the site of a cult. Not the kind with robes and candles, but something older than language. A forgotten religion that believed in awakening the faceless one. A being of silence and consumption, summoned to the ritual of the unseen dance. The dance, she realized, wasn't just performance. It was an offering. Conclusion. The last thing Lena wrote in her journal, scrawled hastily, ink smudged by shaking hands, was, "It's not a girl. It's never been a girl. It's the dance that brings it through." Her parents found her bedroom empty the next morning. Window wide open. No sign of a struggle. Just a circle of ash on the floor. And her laptop, still open to the pause video. The faceless dancer, standing still. And this time, she was staring directly at the camera. Part 2, the spiral grows. The town of Arden Falls tried to move on. The principal's sudden leave of absence was officially marked as personal reasons. The janitor's disappearance was dismissed as retirement without notice. The librarian had family out of state. That's what the announcement said. But the students knew better. Whispers echoed in the halls. A pattern had emerged. Always at 3 a.m. Always someone missing the next day. And now, the CCTV systems throughout the school had mysteriously stopped working altogether. But someone was still watching. In a small house at the edge of town, Carter Lyle sat hunched over Lena's recovered laptop. Her parents had handed it to the police, who couldn't crack her password. Carter had. He was a coder, a loner, a deep web wanderer who had known Lena through their mutual interest in folklore. She had emailed him a week before her disappearance. The message was short. "If I vanish, find the spiral. The dance is a key." Carter had replayed the footage over and over again. The way the faceless girl moved. The strange flicker every time her arms aligned with the symbol. The ash that formed perfectly without error, like it was being burned into the world itself. Then he saw something no one else had caught. In the second video, just after fourth rotation, her shadow split. It wasn't a trick of the light. It fractured, twitched, then crawled toward the wall. A second later, it reconnected with her feet like nothing had happened. Carter paused the video, his heart pounding. He enhanced the frame. The crawling shadow had hands. Fingers too long, too sharp. Claws. He stared into the screen, but he couldn't bring himself to press play again. Something about the pause felt safe. Moving forward felt like falling into something that wouldn't let him climb back out. At exactly 3 a.m., the lights in his room flickered. His door creaked open behind him, and the pause video began playing on its own. He turned slowly. No one was there, but a chill slid down his spine like fingers on bone. He slammed the laptop shut. The screen stayed on. The dancer kept spinning. Carter didn't sleep. The next morning, he called in sick to his part-time job and drove across town to visit the only person who might know more, Mr. Wills, the retired local historian and one-time theology professor who'd lived in Arden Falls longer than anyone. Mr. Wills opened the door cautiously, his eyes sunken but sharp. Carter didn't waste time. He showed the man the footage, then asked the only question that mattered. "What is she?" Wills said nothing for a long while. Then he took a slow, shallow breath. "She's not a she. It's a conduit. We called it a shidra, the silent one, a spirit bound to movement, brought forth through devotion. The cult didn't worship it. They feared it, but they danced because that's the only way to keep it asleep." Carter's voice cracked. "Then why is it awake now?" Wills looked at him with sorrow that seemed deeper than years. "Because someone forgot the steps. And now it's dancing on its own." Carter left in a haze of disbelief. He didn't know what terrified him more, that the town had buried a supernatural horror beneath a school, or that no one had ever stopped to ask why the building had a circular gym floor with symbols carved so faintly into the concrete they were invisible until traced in ash. He returned home to find his laptop missing. The spiral was burned into his desk. That night, he dreamed of spinning. 2 towns over, in a rundown motel, a woman named Mira checked in under a false name. She was a freelance journalist chasing ghost stories, until this one had stopped being just a story. She had followed Lena's digital trail for weeks, watched the cursed footage through screen recordings shared in encrypted chat rooms, and interviewed 2 families of the missing. Her conclusion? The ritual wasn't just local. Similar dances had been recorded in South America, Eastern Europe, and rural parts of Asia, always with a spiral. Always at 3 a.m., always before someone vanished. She believed the entity had been dormant in Arden Falls until someone restarted the dance. Mira lit a circle of candles in her room. Her hands trembled as she placed a mirror in the center of the spiral she'd drawn in chalk. She had no training, no background in the occult, only desperation. She whispered Lena's name 3 times. The mirror darkened. For a second, it reflected not her face, but gymnasium, empty, cold, quiet. Then, the faceless dancer stepped into frame. Mira screamed and threw the mirror against the wall. It shattered, but the shards didn't reflect light anymore. They pulsed softly, like breathing glass. She fled the motel that night, but her car stalled at 2:59 a.m. At 3 o'clock, her dash cam began recording on its own. The last frame showed her car door opening. No one outside, just her being pulled into the dark. Back in Arden Falls, students began reporting hallucinations, seeing people where there were none, hearing music with no source. Some claimed to have danced in their sleep, waking to sore feet and ash-stained sheets. The school shut down for maintenance, but everyone knew that wasn't the truth. Carter wandered the empty gym during the day, tracing the spiral with his fingers, searching for answers. He'd begun seeing the dancer in the corners of his vision, not fully, just a flicker of motion, a twitch of shadow. He tried filming her again, but every camera he used melted internally within minutes. He brought a box of chalk and began copying the symbol across town, in alleys beneath bridges in the woods. He wasn't trying to summon her. He was trying to trap her. Or so he told himself. That night, he found a letter on his doorstep. No stamp, no envelope, just 4 words scrawled in black ink. Stop dancing. Too late. The words burned into his mind like flame on skin. At the police station, a woman named Officer DeWitt filed her last report. She had found remains of Myra's motel room, the symbols, the candles. She tried to report it through the usual channels, but her emails bounced back with static. Her radio only played garbled breathing at 3 a.m., and her partner, Officer Rell, who had laughed it all off, had now been missing for 2 days. DeWitt pulled the security footage from her squad car. What she found wasn't just terrifying. It was impossible. At 3 a.m., she was sitting in the passenger seat, asleep, but the camera showed her stepping out of the car at 3:01. 2 of her, one asleep, one walking in a daze. She followed herself into the woods, barefoot. No return. She closed the footage. And that night, she chained herself inside her apartment, surrounded by salt, mirrors, and prayers. It didn't help. At 3 a.m., every mirror cracked, and the dance began on the wall, her shadow moving against her will. By now, Carter had stopped sleeping. He barely ate. The spiral had grown behind his eyes. He saw it everywhere, in tree branches, in the clouds, in the swirl of coffee. He knew something was coming, not just for him, for everyone. So he set one last trap. He returned to the gym at 2:55 a.m. with cameras hidden in every vent, each hooked to an analog reel-to-reel recorder. No digital tech. No chance for interference. He poured ash in a perfect spiral and stood in the center. "I know you're watching," he said into the dark. "Then come." He began to dance. Not like her. Not perfect. Clumsy. Human. But enough. The room dimmed. The lights flickered. And then she was there. Not walking. Not floating. Just appearing. Arms at her sides. Head tilted. Blank face staring straight into him like a void with hunger. Carter stopped dancing. The floor beneath him opened with a scream of air being torn apart. He fell through darkness. And the cameras melted again. But one reel survived. In it, for a single frame, the dancer paused mid-spin and turned her head. This time, she had a face. It was Lena's, smiling. Part 3, The Descent. Carter's fall seemed endless. His body was weightless, suspended in the blackness. The familiar world above him, the gym, the spiral of ash, all faded into a distant memory as he plunged deeper. The air grew colder, the pressure rising with every passing second. But it was a silence that terrified him the most. It was absolute. No wind, no sounds of his frantic breaths, no beating of his heart, just an overwhelming, suffocating void, as though the very concept of sound and life had been erased. Then, suddenly, his descent stopped. He hit the ground with a thud, but there was no impact. It was as though the floor had simply absorbed him, leaving no mark, no sign of his presence. Carter gasped for breath, his lungs filling with an icy air that burned his throat. He forced his eyes open. He was no longer in the gym. The world around him was completely unfamiliar. He stood in a vast, darkened space, an endless expanse of shifting shadows and flickering lights. There were no walls, no boundaries, just an infinite void. His surroundings seemed to warp and stretch as if the very fabric of reality had been bent. And then he saw her. Lena. She stood in the distance, motionless, her head tilted at an unnatural angle, her limbs contorted in a way that defied the laws of physics. She wore the same haunting, blank expression from the footage. But now, in this place, there was something more, an aura of malevolent energy that rippled around her like a storm waiting to unleash. Carter's throat tightened as he called out, but the words were lost in the void. No sound left his mouth. Lena turned her head slowly, her eyes, black as the abyss itself, locked onto him. And then, impossibly, her lips curled into a grin, a twisted, grotesque smile that made his skin crawl. She began to move, her body twisting in a fluid, hypnotic motion. The dance! It was the same as before, but now it was more intense, more dangerous. The spiral of ash, the flickering shadow, the broken rhythm. Everything seemed to converge in that one endless movement. Carter's mind screamed at him to run, to escape, but his legs refused to obey. His feet were rooted to the ground, as though an invisible force had chained him in place. He could only watch as Lena continued her ritual dance, the dark energy around her growing stronger with every step. The ground beneath him trembled. It was as if the very space around him was alive, feeding off the dance, feeding off the power Lena was channeling. He could feel it now, the pull, a force so overwhelming that it threatened to tear him apart. A voice echoed in his mind, a whisper that wasn't his own. "You're too late." Carter's head spun as the darkness pressed in on him, suffocating him, smothering him with its cold, unnatural presence. He tried to close his eyes, to shut it out, but the vision of Lena's dance was burned into his retina. The shadow that followed her every move seemed to grow larger, more distorted, until it was no longer a shadow at all. It was a creature, a being of pure darkness, its limbs stretching impossibly long. its face a grotesque blur of features that made Carter's stomach churn. Its eyes, or what could pass for eyes, glowed with an unearthly light. It moved with a slow, deliberate purpose, as if drawn to Lena's ritual. But as it approached, it seemed to take notice of Carter. It stopped, and for a brief moment, its gaze flickered toward him. Then it lunged. The sensation of being pulled into something indescribable overwhelmed him. He felt his body twist and contort in ways that should have been impossible. His skin burned. His bones felt like they were cracking, but it wasn't pain. It was something worse. It was a sensation of being erased. He couldn't scream. He couldn't think. All that remained was a blur of images, feelings, and the relentless motion of Lena's dance. He tried to hold on to his consciousness, tried to break free, but the force was too strong. Every part of him was stretched to the breaking point. The shadow enveloped him, swallowing him whole. He was no longer in his body. He was no longer in his mind. He was nothing. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The world came back into focus. But something was wrong. Carter's vision blurred, his senses scattered. He couldn't move, couldn't feel his legs beneath him. He couldn't hear the pounding of his heart anymore. All he could hear was the faint hum of static, like the world itself was losing its signal. And then the voice came again. "You are part of the dance now." Carter's eyes shot open, and he realized with a sickening lurch that he was no longer alone. Lena was still there, standing before him, but she was no longer the same. Her face, once lifeless and expressionless, now held something far worse. Her eyes gleamed with a terrifying intelligence, as though she had transcended the world she had once known. Her smile was too wide, too sharp. The shadow that followed her now circled around them both, pulsating with dark energy. The spiral, the ritual, had not just affected the world around them. It had infected Carter. He could feel it in his veins, coursing through him like poison. The darkness, the dance was inside him now. Lena reached out, her hand cold and brittle like bone. She touched his shoulder, and in that moment, Carter felt himself slipping away. His body was no longer his own. He was becoming a part of her, a part of the ritual. Her whisper echoed in his mind again. The dance never ends. Not for us. Not for anyone. Carter tried to pull away, to escape, but the darkness consumed him. He was part of the dance now, bound to its rhythm, its will. He was no longer Carlisle. He was another piece in the puzzle. And as Lena continued her twisted dance, Carter moved with her, his limbs jerking in sync with hers, his body no longer his own. The spiral had claimed them both. And somewhere, far above them, a clock struck 3 a.m. The ritual was far from over. It had only just begun. Part 4, the town sleeps, but she dances. Detective Marla Reyes sat alone in the dimly lit police station, the static from the silent monitors humming like the whisper of ghosts. She hadn't slept in 48 hours, and her eyes were bloodshot from scanning every frame of the recovered CCTV footage. The town of Grendale had lost 8 people in the span of 2 weeks, and no trace of them had been found. All leads ended with the same clip. Lena Hawthorne dancing in front of a camera that shouldn't have been on. The footage always started the same way. A flickering bulb, silence, then Lena emerging from the shadows. Her movements were jagged but deliberate, as if pulled by unseen strings. The room around her would grow darker with each frame, like the camera was slowly being pulled into another realm. Marla didn't believe in the supernatural. Or she hadn't. Not until she watched the footage of Officer Carter disappearing mid-frame during his investigation at the abandoned gym. 1 second he was walking toward the camera, flashlight flickering, and the next gone. Not a blur, not a cut, just erased. She tapped her pen against her notebook and stared at the map of disappearances pinned to the wall. Red string connected the victims like arteries. They all lived near old surveillance blind spots. Warehouses, schools, alleys, places with dead cameras. Except, for some reason, the cameras always turned back on the moment Lena appeared, like she wanted to be seen. Marla rewound the footage again, watching Lena's dress flutter as she spun slowly, her face frozen in that blank, otherworldly expression. And then she noticed something new. There was someone else in the background this time. A shape. No, a figure. Tall, slender, featureless. But somehow watching her. The outline was subtle, but it hadn't been there before. Marla paused the frame. Her heart thudded. The more she stared, the more the figure seemed to look back. The lights flickered in the station. Her breath caught. "Not now," she muttered, standing up to check the fuse box. But the moment her feet hit the cold linoleum, the station lights went out completely. The monitors went black, then static. Then, one by one, the screens began to glow again, not with camera feeds, with footage. Lena, dancing. But this time, it wasn't a recording. She was moving in real time. Marla's mouth went dry. Her own desk, her own station, was now visible behind Lena in the footage. Lena was inside the station, or somewhere impossibly close. The sound of bare feet echoed in the hall. Thud, drag, thud, drag. The temperature dropped sharply. Frost curled on the windows. Marla reached for her gun, but hesitated. Bullets wouldn't stop, whatever this was. She backed toward the door, eyes fixed on the screen where Lena's image danced closer, closer. A whisper curled through the air. "Dance with me." Marla turned. No one was there. She ran, through the empty station halls, past the flickering lights, until she burst out the back exit into the cold night air. She didn't stop running until she reached her car and peeled out of the lot. Her hands trembled as she clutched the wheel. She needed to get to someone, anyone, who'd seen what she had. She drove straight to the home of Alan Cray, a local electrician and tech junkie who had worked with the department on surveillance upgrades. He lived alone in a cluttered one-story house on the outskirts of town, a place covered in antennas and cameras pointed at the sky. He opened the door, still chewing a sandwich, blinking like he hadn't slept in weeks. "I need your help," Marla said. "It's about the surveillance system. It's doing something it shouldn't." Cray narrowed his eyes. "Is this about the dance girl? You've seen her?" He stepped aside and ushered her into a room filled with screens, wires, and flickering monitors. "She's on all of them. Every old camera in town. Even the ones I disconnected. It's like she's hijacking the signal. But it's more than that. She's pulling things through the signal, like the cameras are doors. Doors to where?" He pointed to a monitor showing a black void. "Not here." Marla sat down hard. "There's something else, too. A shadow, a figure." Cray nodded slowly. "She's not the danger. She's the lure. The shadow, it follows her dance. Feeds on those who watch too long. I've seen people vanish on camera. Not walk away. Just cut out." Marla felt the nausea rise in her gut. "Then what happens to them?" Cray looked her dead in the eyes. "They come back." He hit a button and brought up a feed from outside the Glendale train station. Grainy black and white. 2 people walking. Then suddenly one of them paused, twitched, turned toward the camera. It was Officer Carter, but his face was wrong. Blank, pale, his eyes pitch black, just like Lena's. And then behind him, Lena stepped into frame mid-twirl. They were walking together. "They've been spotted in multiple places," Cray said, voice shaking. "Abandoned parks, empty schoolyards. The last place was 2 nights ago, just outside a children's hospital." Marla stood. "We have to stop this." "You don't stop it," Cray said. "You break the signal. Every camera, every device. No more footage. If no one sees her, she can't pull them in. But what about the ones already taken?" Cray swallowed hard. "They're not coming back." A loud bang shattered the tension. One of the monitors exploded in a burst of sparks. Another one flickered violently. And then another. On all of them, Lena, twirling slowly, now staring directly into the lens. "You saw too much," she whispered through the static. The walls trembled. A cold wind blew through the room. Cray screamed as tendrils of darkness burst from the screens, wrapping around his chest and dragging him toward the monitors. Marla tried to pull him back, but the shadows were too strong. Cray's body bent unnaturally as the void consumed him. With a final scream, he was gone, Marla stumbled back, breath ragged, heart pounding. Every screen in the room went dark, except one. Lena, alone, smiling. And then, slowly, she raised her hand and pointed at Marla. The message was clear. She was next. Marla bolted out of the house just as the power grid in the neighborhood went dark. The sky above Glendale shimmered like a glitching screen. Somewhere deep in the quiet streets, music began to play, soft, distorted, like an old waltz on a broken phonograph. And someone was dancing to it. Part 5. She dances in the static. Marla didn't stop running until her lungs felt like they were on fire. The streets of Glendale were deathly silent. Every house dark, every window like a watching eye. Her phone was dead. Her radio just emitted a wall of static. And even her thoughts felt like they were being drowned out by something humming just beneath reality. The music. She could still hear it. Faint yet constant. A distorted waltz that crawled under her skin. Wherever she went, it was there, like it was following her, or leading her. She drove aimlessly to the town's back roads, avoiding traffic cams and old CCTV zones. Anything connected to the town's surveillance was no longer safe. Lena was using it like a spiderweb, each lens a thread, pulling people into a ritual and never letting them go. She needed to destroy the web. Marla pulled over at the old Glendale Municipal Records building. It was one of the few places in town that had never been updated, still running on analog systems and disconnected from the main surveillance grid. It was where the town kept the original blueprints for infrastructure, including the power lines and the camera feeds. Inside, the building smelled like mildew and dust. The air was thick, and her flashlight beam barely cut through it. She moved quickly, finding the archive room and tearing through files until she found what she needed. The master surveillance schematic. Every camera, every signal repeater, every junction box. She took pictures with her backup camera and memorized the key locations. If she could disable the central nodes, she might be able to kill the signal for good. But as she turned to leave, she heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. Footsteps. Bare. Deliberate. Echoing softly down the hall. She turned off the flashlight and crouched, holding her breath. The tapping stopped for a moment, then resumed, closer this time. And now there was a dragging sound, like something being pulled across the floor. Marla bolted. She barely made it out of the building before something slammed the door behind her with unnatural force. She didn't look back. It was clear now. Lena wasn't just watching. She was hunting. Marla's next stop was the main surveillance hub located in the basement of Glendale City Hall. She broke in through a side entrance, heart racing, hands trembling as she descended into the belly of the beast. The basement was lit only by blinking server lights. Towers of equipment lined the walls, each humming with quiet menace. She moved quickly, checking the schematic and locating the main junction panel. She pried it open and stared at the tangle of wires. Then the screens flickered on behind her. One by one, they lit up, each showing a different part of town. Lena was on every screen, dancing, spinning, her face never changing. Her eyes always locked forward, always watching. And then she stopped on all screens simultaneously. She tilted her head slightly, as if listening, and then her mouth moved. You're too late. Marla's hands worked faster, ripping out wires, smashing switches. Sparks flew. Some screens died, but others stayed on, burning bright with Lena's gaze. Then came the knock. It was soft at first, then louder, then thunderous. From the hallway behind her, the lights went out. Marla grabbed a crowbar from her belt and backed into a corner. The door creaked open slowly, revealing nothing but darkness. And then Lena stepped through, not on a screen, in the flesh. She moved exactly like she had in the footage. Jerky yet graceful, a marionette dancing on unseen strings. Her face was pale, eyes black voids that swallowed the light. You watched me, Lena whispered, her voice layered with echoes, like dozens of her speaking at once. Marla raised a crowbar. You won't take me. Lena twirled, and with every spin, the room darkened further. The walls peeled, reality cracking like old paint. Marla swung the crowbar, but it passed through Lena like smoke. The spirit didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned close, cold breath on Marla's cheek. "You already belong to me." Suddenly, Marla's body locked up. Her limbs refused to move. Her mind screamed, but her body began to dance. Unwillingly, painfully, her arms rose, her legs twisted, her feet scraped the floor in perfect mimicry of Lena's ritual. "No!" she gasped. "Stop." But her body obeyed a rhythm she couldn't hear, one not meant for the living. The screens around her began to pulse with light, each beat syncing with her movements. The cameras weren't just broadcasting her now. They were recording, capturing her surrender, feeding it, and the music swelled. A crowd of shadows formed behind Lena, dozens of them, all with vacant faces. People who'd vanished, the missing, the consumed. Officer Carter, Cray, even the children from the hospital. All of them danced with her. All of them were hers. Marla's heart raced. Her bones ached. Her soul felt like it was slipping away, bit by bit, into the static. Then she remembered the backup generator. If she could overload the circuit and burn the servers, maybe, just maybe, she could end it, not just for herself, but for everyone. With a sudden burst of will, she broke free from the trance and hurled herself toward the breaker box. Lena shrieked, a sound like 1,000 feedback loops exploding at once. Marla threw the crowbar into the box and yanked the lever. The room lit up in a violent flash. Then darkness. Marla woke hours later, lying in the ashes of Surveillance Hub. The screens were destroyed. The servers melted. The air was quiet. No music. No footsteps. No Lena. She staggered out into the sunlight. The town was still. People were returning to their routines. No one mentioned the disappearances. No one remembered the shadows. It was as if the spell had been broken, and their minds had been reset. But Marla remembered. She carried it in every breath, every blink. She moved to a new town soon after. No cameras, no electronics. She lived simply, quietly. But sometimes, late at night, her reflection would move just a second too slow. And somewhere, faintly, she'd hear the music start again. Thud, drag, thud, drag. And she'd dance. Just for a moment, just enough to remember that Lena was still watching. Part 6, the archive room. Marla had thought it was over. Burning down the surveillance hub should have ended Lena's reign of terror. But the music hadn't truly left. It followed her like an afterimage, present in the crackle of old speakers, in the faint hum of electric wires behind her walls, in the static of dead television channels. The town may have moved on, but Marla hadn't. Something was still tethering Lena to this world. She had to find it and end it completely. Her only clue came from the whispers of an old librarian named Mrs. Winslow, a woman everyone thought had died years ago. She approached Marla in the produce aisle of a gasping, flickering supermarket, leaned in close and rasped, "You didn't kill her. You just turned off the lights." The archive holds her root. Before Marla could respond, Mrs. Winslow had vanished, leaving behind a crumpled note tucked inside a rotten apple in her cart. The archive was a mythical part of Grendale's library system, a locked basement sublevel said to be sealed decades ago, housing banned books, curse tapes, and relics of the town's darker past. It was never on the official floor plans. You had to know it was there. Marla returned to the Grendale Public Library that same night, armed with bolt cutters, salt packets, and a flashlight wrapped in red cellophane to dim the glow. The library stood like a mausoleum, abandoned after too many accidents. Kids had gone missing inside. Lights flickered and never stayed on. Shadows lingered too long between the shelves. She slipped in through a side door left ajar, almost like it had been waiting for her. Inside, the library was colder than it should have been. Dust choked the air, and the shelves seemed to stretch into impossible angles. It felt like walking through a maze designed to be walked only once. The children's section still had torn paper crafts hanging from the ceiling. One of them was a stick figure with no face. She moved quickly, finding the back room labeled staff only. Behind a toppled desk and stacks of forgotten boxes, she discovered the door, hidden behind a moth-eaten curtain. It wasn't locked. It never had been. The stairs led downward into thick, unnatural darkness. The archive smelled of mold and regret. Shelves lined the walls, but instead of books, they were filled with tapes. Old VHS cassettes, reels, and Betamax cartridges with no labels, only dates. Some went back to the 1940s. A monitor sat in the middle of the room on a metal table, already glowing softly with static. Next to it, a VCR, humming faintly even though it was unplugged. Something was breathing behind the shelves. Marla walked slowly, scanning the rows until one tape caught her attention. It wasn't dusty. It was clean, recently touched. On the label, handwritten in jagged script, Lena, root. Her fingers trembled as she inserted it into the machine. The screen flared to life. At first, just darkness, then faint candlelight, a circle of figures in robes, chanting in a language that didn't belong to this world. In the center of the circle, a girl, Lena, but younger, much younger. She wasn't dancing. She was screaming. Marla watched in horror as the ritual unfolded. Lena was chosen, bound, sacrificed in a cruel attempt to channel power from the eye behind the veil. The townspeople had tried to create a being that would protect Grendale from its misfortunes. Instead, they had unleashed something far worse. They hadn't killed Lena. They fractured her soul, trapping her between worlds. And they had filmed it. The tape distorted violently, and the screen bled red. Then Lena's face appeared, not as a child, as the thing she had become. "You see me now," the face whispered from the screen. "So you're mine again." Marla jerked back. The lights in the archive snapped off, and the air grew thick. The shelves shuddered. The tapes trembled. Lena was coming. Marla grabbed the tape, clutching it to her chest as she ran to the maze of shelves. The walls groaned. The monitors screamed. The ceiling cracked. The stairs were gone. She was trapped. A figure appeared between the shelves. Lena, floating inches above the ground, arms twisted unnaturally behind her back, hair hanging like ropes. "You watch me again," she whispered. Marla looked down at the tape. The root. If this was the source of Lena's connection to the world, maybe it could also be her anchor, and maybe it could be destroyed. Marla sprinted for the table and yanked the tape from the VCR. It burned her hands like ice. Lena shrieked, and the floor buckled. Blood began dripping from the ceiling, forming shapes on the floor, dancers' faces, screaming mouths. With a final scream, Marla hurled the tape against the wall. It didn't break. She needed fire. Her bag, salt, matches, a small bottle of rubbing alcohol. She emptied the bottle over the tape and struck a match. The flame hesitated, sputtered, and then caught. Lena howled. The entire archive shook as the fire spread unnaturally fast, devouring not just the tape but the shelves, the floor, the shadows. Every cursed relic began to burn, and the room filled with shrieking voices. Marla shielded her face and ran. A door appeared where the wall once stood. She didn't question it. She leapt through. Outside, dawn was breaking. The library behind her stood silent. No smoke, no flames, but its windows had gone black, as if whatever lived inside had been blinded. Marla turned away, her ears still ringing. She didn't hear the music anymore, but that didn't mean it was gone. She had only burned one root, and deep beneath Grendale, many others still grew, still watching, still waiting. Part 7, The Silent Parade. A week passed, and Marla didn't hear the music. Not in the walls, not in the radios, not in the static hum of lights. The town of Grendale felt still. People who had vanished hadn't returned, but no new disappearances occurred either. It was as if Lena had been pushed back behind the veil, her reach fractured by the burning of the root tape. Marla wanted to believe it was over, but peace in Grendale was a fragile thing, too thin, too quiet. On the 7th night, a knock came at her door. Not a pounding, not a frantic bang, just a single knock, then silence. She froze on the couch, clutching her tea, eyes locked on the door. The house was dim, lit only by a single lamp. Another knock. She tiptoed to the door and peeked through the peephole. Nothing. But when she opened the door slowly, a small box rested on the porch. It was hand-carved, old, and lacquered black. No note, no return address. She didn't bring it inside. She opened it right there, heart pounding. Inside was a single strip of film reel, brittle and yellowed. Folded beneath it, a newspaper clipping, barely legible. Local festival returns. Glendale Silent Parade to be held after 20-year ban. The date was next week. Marla's stomach turned. There hadn't been a silent parade since the mass vanishing. She thought it was just a town legend, something they whispered about in school before Halloween. But the article was real. And the film reel, was it from the last parade? Her eyes adjusted to tiny handwriting etched into the inside of the box lid. She doesn't dance alone. Not anymore. Marla spent the next 2 days tracking down anyone who remembered the parade. Most shook their heads. Others refused to speak, their eyes full of the kind of fear you only see in survivors. She finally found an old man named Clark, who lived in the basement of the abandoned church on Main. Clark hadn't spoken in years, but when she showed him a box, he cried. Not out of sadness, out of terror. He scribbled one sentence on the wall beside him in charcoal. Don't let her lead it. The town square began transforming overnight. Marla woke to find black banners strung between lampposts, speakers mounted on rooftops. A makeshift stage built right where the original surveillance hub had stood. No one seemed to know who organized it. Mayor Lang insisted it was a return to tradition, something to honor our roots. Marla knew better. Lena had returned, not through screens this time, but through memory, through ritual, through the minds of those who believed she was ever really gone. The parade was set for midnight. Marla didn't plan to attend, until she saw the missing people's faces stapled to a billboard under the stage. All the vanished townsfolk, young, old, dozens, new posters printed with the words, "Returning guests." She recognized the photos. Her sister was one of them. Midnight came too quickly. The air buzzed with strange electricity. The entire town had gathered, silent, dressed in black, holding candles that never flickered despite the wind. No music, just the sound of synchronized footsteps echoing down the street. The silent parade had begun. Marla weaved through the crowd, looking for anyone she could trust. But their faces were blank. Not blank with confusion, blank with intent, as though they were sleepwalking through a dream given to them. At the front of the line, the dancers appeared. 6 women in long veils and flowing gowns moved with mechanical grace. Behind them, a float carried a single chair, draped in white lace. It was empty until it wasn't. One moment it was bare, the next, Lena sat upon it. No one screamed. No one moved. Only Marla saw her for what she truly was, a tangle of limbs and eyes beneath the illusion of a girl. Her presence crackled the air, warping reality, warping belief itself. She raised one hand. The crowd stopped and began to hum, the same melody that played on the CCTV before. Low, deep, wrong. And then they started disappearing, not into thin air, but into themselves, folding, melting, as though some invisible line was being crossed, as though Lena's influence had finally gathered enough believers to open the door. Marla had to act. She spotted Clark among the crowd, eyes rolled back, mouth open in a voiceless scream. His hands shook violently, and in them he held a real projector, the old kind, film-fed, analog. He didn't know why he brought it, but she did. She grabbed the reel from her coat, the one that came in the black box, and slammed it into projector. The crowd didn't stop humming, but Lena turned. The reel began to play on the side of the building. It wasn't just old footage. It was the original ritual, the first dance, the first lie. It showed the townsfolk summoning Lena. It showed what they fed her. It showed what she became. And then the audio began to warp the hum. People clutched their heads. Some screamed. Others collapsed. Lena stood, floating above her seat now, eyes wide and black. "Stop," she hissed. But the film wouldn't stop. The old stories had power. The truth had power. Marla pushed Clark away and increased the volume on the ancient machine. Its gears screamed, but the image remained steady. Suddenly, Lena's body began to break apart. Petals of smoke, curls of static. She flickered, face splitting open like a blooming flower of ash. Her voice lost strength. The crowd began to wake, some staggering, others crying. The illusion broke. The music died. The parade halted. Marla pulled the reel from the projector as the final image, a young Lena smiling before the ritual, faded to black. By dawn, the stage was gone. The banners were gone. The crowd had no memory of the night before. They spoke of vivid dreams, foggy heads. Nothing more. But Marla knew Lena was still out there, watching, waiting, looking for another stage, another dance. And next time, it wouldn't be a silent parade. Part 8, the dance never ended. The morning after parade, Marla wandered the empty streets of Glendale, still hearing the phantom rhythm of the drums that had never actually beat. The memory of Lena's face, flickering, unraveling in the air like a film catching fire, haunted every corner of her thoughts. The townspeople returned to their routines, oblivious. At the bakery, old Mrs. Hewley smiled and handed out buns like she hadn't just marched in a death parade. The high school was open, students laughing in the courtyard as if their minds hadn't been hijacked by a forgotten spirit. No one remembered the music. No one remembered the chair. No one remembered Lena. But Marla did. And so did Clark. They met again at the abandoned church that afternoon. Clark had retrieved a box of old surveillance equipment, the kind once used in Glendale's central CCTV station. Among it, he found a tattered logbook. Inside, names, timestamps, footage lists, and symbols. The last entry chilled her. 7:06 p.m., camera 13. Dance continues. No footage saved. It was dated 2 days from now. Is it predicting? She whispered. Clark only stared, then pointed to a small symbol beside the entry, a spiral drawn in thick black ink. She recognized it. The same spiral painted on Lena's float. What is that? She asked. He didn't speak. Instead, he brought out an old Polaroid photo. It showed a group of girls standing in a field, holding hands, all in white dresses. One of them, face slightly blurred, stood apart from the rest, not smiling, not looking at the camera, just staring. Lena. The date on the photo was 1982. Beneath it in faded pen, the first disappearance. She chose her audience. 2 days passed like a noose tightening. The morning of the predicted event, a thick fog settled over Glendale. Radios in town played nothing but static, no matter the station. Phone signals dropped. Power flickered, just briefly, but enough to make every resident glance upward with unease. And at exactly 7:06 p.m., camera 13, which no longer existed, having been dismantled years ago, came back online. Marla watched the feed in Clark's basement. Static, then a slow fade in. It wasn't the town square. It was the old orchard on the edge of Glendale, the one they closed off after the sinkhole swallowed 3 kids back in '89. The field now glowed faintly under the moonlight, and standing there was a circle of girls, in white, holding hands, dancing. Their movements were jerky, disjointed, like marionettes tangled in their own strings. And in the center, head tilted back, arms raised. Lena. She was real, not a projection, not a trick of memory. She had regrown. The real had torn her apart, yes, but it didn't destroy her essence. She had latched onto something deeper than film now, something older. Memory isn't the root anymore, Marla whispered. It's the movement. Lena's ritual wasn't bound to technology. It had merely used it. Now it lived in the rhythm, in the repetition, in the dance. Marla raced to the orchard, flashlight in hand. Clark trailing behind her. The fog swallowed their path, and the ground felt soft, almost pulsing, like breathing earth. They reached the hilltop and froze. The circle of girls was still dancing, but they weren't girls anymore. Their skin was pale, paper-thin, their eyes hollow. Some were rotted in places, black veins crawling down their necks. Others twitched unnaturally with every step, as though they didn't remember what a human body was supposed to move like. The music was silent, but Marla could feel it. The beat vibrated in her teeth, in her bones. Clark raised a camcorder, an old one, analog, and pointed it toward Lena. The lens cracked. Without warning, Lena opened her eyes. Pitch black. She stopped dancing. And so did the others. Slowly, one by one, they all turned toward Marla. She felt her knees weaken. But Lena smiled. "You watched me," she said softly. "You filmed me. You remembered." Marla shook her head. "I burned the tape." Lena stepped forward. "But you still think about me. You still play the steps in your mind." She raised one hand, and Marla's flashlight flickered. Clark dropped the camcorder, clutching his ears. Blood trickled from his nose. Behind Lena, the girls began to sway again. Marla realized something vital. The ritual couldn't continue without an audience. Lena needed to be seen, to be believed. And if Marla could take that from her, she turned and ran. Back through the fog, back toward the town, ignoring Lena's voice echoing behind her. "You can't forget me. You dance in your dreams now. All of you do." Back at Clark's basement, she tore the film logbook apart, erased every note, burned every photograph. She deleted the footage from every copy, every cloud. She smashed the projector. She broke the camcorder. Then she did something she feared she'd have to. She closed her eyes and pictured the dance. Step by step, she moved with it, alone, in silence. She felt the pull, the presence. And when she reached the end, she fell to her knees because she knew something horrible. She hadn't resisted. She had perfected it. And in that perfection, Lena now lived inside her. Marla looked in the mirror. For just a moment, her reflection wasn't dancing with her. It was watching, smiling. Part 9. She chose her audience. The town of Grendale had gone silent. Not in the way sleepy towns go quiet before dawn, but in the way a theater holds its breath before the curtain rises. The air itself felt rehearsed. Every breeze a step in a larger choreography none of them could see. And at the center of it all was Marla, or what was left of her. She no longer recognized her own thoughts. They came in patterns, rhythmic, echoing steps she hadn't taken but somehow remembered. She tried to recall her own childhood, her first day of school, her parents' faces, and instead saw a camera lens, always watching, a crowd, always clapping, and Lena's eyes. Lena, who no longer needed film. Lena, who had evolved beyond ritual. Now she existed in the mind, in memory, in mimicry. Marla sat alone in Clark's basement, its walls now scrawled with charcoal spirals, some fresh, some old and bleeding into the concrete. She'd been drawing them compulsively, not even realizing at times. Sometimes she found them etched into her arms in ink. Sometimes she'd wake up humming. The townspeople had changed too. More and more of them had begun to vanish. Not all at once. Just quietly, like actors exiting a stage after their scene. No one questioned it. No one even noticed. Clark was gone. He hadn't said goodbye. He hadn't packed. His front door had been left ajar, his favorite boots by the fireplace. On his kitchen table was a single photograph. Marla, mid-spin, eyes closed, arms outstretched. But she had no memory of the moment being captured. And behind her, in the shadows, stood a pale figure in white, watching. Marla found herself wandering the orchard again, the same field where the dance had last emerged. But the trees had changed. Their bark now bore deep gashes, each the size and shape of a human mouth. And if she stood still long enough, she could swear they whispered, "Watch her. Join her. She'd dance for you first." At the center of the clearing, she found a chair, old, wooden, familiar, and beside it, an old camera on a tripod. A sign nailed to a post read, "Audience required." Marla backed away, shaking, but her feet betrayed her. She stumbled forward, her body tugged by an unseen rhythm. She didn't sit. She danced, unwillingly, her muscles pulsing, bones cracking with every forced step. She twisted, turned, her breath short and ragged, her mouth opened in a silent scream. But her limbs, oh God, her limbs moved with perfect grace. Like Lena's. When it stopped, she collapsed in the dirt. and heard applause. Not thunderous, not raucous, just enough. She looked up. A crowd of townspeople, all in white, faces blank, hands clapping, eyes glowing, and in the middle stood Lena, smiling. She leaned down and whispered into Marla's ear, "You dance well. They remember you now." Marla cried, not from fear, but from exhaustion, from the helplessness of being chosen. When she woke, she was in her bed. No dirt, no orchard, no audience, but her body ached. Her feet were bruised and raw. Her sheets smelled of smoke and earth, and her bedroom mirror was shattered. Something moved in the corner of her vision. She turned, no one there, but on her wall, written in ash, "One more night." She tried to leave town, tried to drive, but every road out of Glendale looped back to Main Street. The gas station attendant, normally quiet, now greeted her with a grin too wide and eyes too dull. "You're the dancer," he said. She didn't respond. He laughed. "We all have roles." She ran, back to the church. It was empty, except for the projector screen. She hadn't brought one, but it was there, flickering to life. It showed her, standing in the orchard, dancing, and Lena behind her, arms folded, the reel looped, over and over. And with each loop, Marla felt her name slipping. She was becoming the reel. She was becoming the dance. That night, she heard drums, not recorded, not imagined, real, from the streets outside. She stepped out and saw them, the entire town moving in slow rhythm, eyes closed, hands raised, silent steps in perfect unison. She watched from her porch, breath shallow, as Lena passed by, leading them. Then Lena stopped, turned, and extended her hand, not to Marla, to the camera mounted on the town hall across the street. It turned toward Marla and blinked red, recording. She didn't sleep. She burned every photo of herself she could find, tore her house apart, removed every reflective surface. And yet, in the hallway mirror, she saw herself dance, not in the present, but in all timelines, as if she'd always been a part of it. At dawn, she returned to the orchard for the final time. The chair was gone, the camera too. Only the audience remained. But now they looked like her. Every face. Her. Hundreds of her. All watching. And in the middle of them, Lena whispered, "You gave me an ending. Now I give you yours." The wind rose. The trees sang. And the dance began again. But this time, Marla didn't fight. She performed it flawlessly. Because there was no Marla now. Only the role. Only the ritual. And as the sun rose over Glendale, the cameras all shut off at once, because the story had reached a moment it no longer needed to be seen, only felt. Part 10, the echo will be broadcast. It started with static, faint at first, a gentle crackle on radios, televisions, and even smartphones. Then came the whispers, just under the frequency human ears could comfortably register. But some still heard it, children mostly. And the old. "She's still dancing," they said. She never stopped. The town of Glendale remained sealed from the outside world, not by fences or armed guards, but by silence. News reports stopped mentioning it. GPS rerouted travelers around it. People who left forgot it existed. People who lived there became part of something else. In an abandoned apartment on the outskirts, the television flickered to life though it hadn't been plugged in for years. It showed the orchard, empty, until a figure stepped into frame, graceful, barefoot, arms gliding through air heavy with intent. Marla. Her eyes were hollow, skin ash pale, but her movements were beautiful, perfect. She didn't look at the camera. She didn't need to. The camera moved on its own now, a ghost operator filming a ghost. Across the screen, a message appeared in bleeding white letters. "You are the audience now." The footage spread like a virus. No one knew who uploaded it. It just appeared. Late at night, on random YouTube channels, Twitch streams, even CCTV loops in city malls. Sometimes it hijacked broadcasts. A cooking show would cut mid-recipe, to show 10 seconds of the orchard. A football match would flash her eyes for a single frame. Enough to be noticed. Enough to be remembered. Some said those who watched too long would start seeing her elsewhere, in reflections, in dreams, in memories that didn't belong to them. Lena was never seen again, but her presence never faded. In every abandoned security booth and flickering street lamp, something remained. Symbols carved into glass. Music boxes turning slowly with no one to wind them. Muffled clapping in the distance where no audience stood. A conspiracy subreddit popped up. Hashtag the Marla loop. It cataloged sightings, shared coordinates, offered theories. She was a vessel, one post claimed. Lena needed a form. Marla became that form. She didn't die, another user insisted. She got broadcast into us. And perhaps the most chilling comment. I saw her. She was in my CCTV footage. But I don't even have a camera. A girl in Sweden danced herself to death in front of a mirror. A man in Oregon clawed out his eyes after watching a live stream that never ended. A child in India whispered a song that matched the melody Marla danced to, note for note, though no one had ever taught it to her. They were all marked, not possessed, not cursed, just tuned in. Marla's sister Kay, who had long since fled Glendale, received a package on her doorstep. No return address, just a dusty USB drive, and a note, "You should have been the one to stop her." Kay hesitated before plugging it in. It contained one file, final_cut MP4. She pressed play. The screen showed the orchard again. Only this time, the camera zoomed in slowly, not on Marla, but on something behind her, half concealed in shadow. Lena? No. Kay saw herself, 10 years younger, watching from the tree-lean, mouth open, silent, frozen. She didn't remember this. She'd never been there. Or had she? She scrubbed forward in the footage. Each frame showed Marla dancing, sweat dirt, blood smearing her skin. And behind her, the crowd grew, faces distorted, some wearing masks, some missing mouths, all clapping in perfect rhythm. When the video ended, Kay sat in darkness and heard her name whispered from a hallway, not in a voice she recognized, but in her own. Somewhere in an empty school building in Glendale, a new girl stood in front of a mirror. She didn't know who Marla was. She didn't know what the orchard meant. She had just moved in with her parents and found a camera in the attic. It was old, dusty, but the battery still worked. When she turned it on, it pointed at her. A pre-recorded message played to the viewfinder, a faint voice humming, then clapping. The girl felt her arms move, felt her legs sway. At first, it was fun, but she couldn't stop, even when she wanted to, even when she cried. Outside, a neighbor's security camera clicked on by itself. Inside the screen, a dance. Inside the viewer, a seed planted. It was starting again. And this time, the audience wasn't just watching. They were participating. They say some rituals require fire. Some require blood. But the most dangerous ones? They only require attention. And now, you've been watching too. The screen went black. For a moment, the silence was deafening. Then a faint, rhythmic tapping began, like footsteps, echoing just beyond the walls. A slow, deliberate clap. Another, and another. The echo multiplied, spreading through the room, through the town, through every camera, every device still watching. Marla's dance never truly ended, because some stories don't close. They only wait, waiting for their next audience, waiting for the next dance to begin. And somewhere, just beyond sight, Lena smiled, because the ritual was never about the dance itself. It was about the watching. And now you're part of it. The screen flickered one last time, and then it was gone. But the echo of the applause, that never fades.